Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Random Trek. I am your commander, Brennan Moore. Our captain is stuck in a transporter buffer, so it's up to me to share some thoughts today. We will be back next week with another episode. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got into Star Trek with the movies. Because it's a long and complicated story involving the movies and the shows and so on, I'll keep it simple by explaining my journey with the movies. I believe the first Star Trek movie I saw was Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. I believe, if I recall correctly, watching Star Trek, it was all over the place. I began by watching Star Trek IV. And then I saw Star Trek Generations in theater, I think. And then after that, I believe I saw Star Trek. So the 4, 7, I think the next one I saw was number 5, The Final Frontier, right? And then 2 and 3, and then 1, and then 9, no, and then 6, then 9, then 8, then 10. So it gets very complicated. So I saw the Voyage Home and then Generations, but then The Final Frontier, then The Search for Spock, and oh, The Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock, then the motion picture, then Insurrection, then First Contact, then Nemesis. It goes all over the map entirely. It's very messy as to how I got into the movies. When you add the shows, Next Generation was really my introduction to Star Trek. But the movies, it was all over the place. Now, it's funny that everyone remembers Voyage Home, and they refer to it as the one with the whales. Now, where they filmed the quote-unquote Cetacean Institute in Sausalito is actually the Monterey Bay Aquarium in Monterey, California. A place which I've been probably 5 times, 6 times. And some of the locations are still the same. The reason I watch things out of order, I think, is just the time that I was growing up. Because Star Trek Generations came out in 1994. I would have been 8 or 9, and I saw it in theater, I believe. And that one gets a little bit complicated because it wasn't until many years later that I fully understood the context. Because once I watched The Next Generation, once it was on streaming and I could watch it more at my leisure, then I understood what the context was, who the Duras sisters are, why the Romulans would be working with them, so on and so forth. But the journey with the movies was all over the place because I think my interest in Star Trek was definitely there, but not nearly as obsessive as it is now. My favorite of the films is The Wrath of Khan. Uh, Second favorite would probably be Voyage Home. And I got to watch those movies with my nephew just a few weeks ago. The first time he had seen them, I believe. So that was really exciting. But my journey with the movies has gone all over the place. But now, of course, if I watch them, I usually watch them in order. Unless I'm just feeling like one random one in particular. I think that my top three are probably the Wrath of Khan, the Voyage Home, and First Contact. First Contact was the odd that I saw Insurrection first, and then saw First Contact. First Contact, I think, is one of the great Star Trek films, and I just love the whole feel of it. Having the Borg on the big screen, it's really extraordinary, and I think that it's the best of the Next Generation films. It was really an interesting time because in the 1960s, Star Trek was actually almost canceled during its second season. But thanks to fans like Beau Trimble and their letter writing campaign of many of the fans, the show was kept alive to its third season. And then sadly it was canceled. But in the 70s, we have what's called the syndication generation. That was all the kids who didn't really watch Star Trek when it was on TV in the 60s, but watched the reruns. We also have to credit Star Trek the Animated Series for keeping the fandom alive. And the watching of reruns of Star Trek in the 70s is really what created the fandom that we know and love today. The success of the syndication generation after Star Wars came out in 1977, the desire for a Star Trek movie really took off. And in 1979, we got Star Trek the Motion Picture, which made a lot of money, got somewhat mixed reaction. I actually like it. I really do. And in the 80s, Star Trek movies did very well. And also, this brought us to the launch of Star Trek The Next Generation. And all of it really is thanks to that syndication generation. This includes our friends Steve Morris and Scott Nance. This includes my dad and many others. Bo Trimble, of course, who passed away recently. Really an extraordinary thing of the tower of the good of fandoms. And there's been a lot of discussion lately about the dark side of fandom. I think this case with Star Trek, with the salvation of Star Trek in the 70s, really highlights the positive elements of fandom. And it brings us to where we are today, where there is a plethora of Star Trek that's like a buffet, and you can pick what you like. In 2 days, season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy will be released on Netflix. There's a Star Trek Academy show in the works. Looks like it'll star Holly Hunter and Paul Giamatti. Discovery sadly has ended. Picard has ended. And Lower Decks will be ending, sadly. Unless another letter writing campaign will save that show. And we're also gearing up for a show with 7 of 9 as captain of the Enterprise G. We'll see how that goes. So really, it was the movies in the 80s that really gave us this amazing era of Star Trek that we live in now, particularly in the late 80s and the 90s. In the 90s, you had Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager. So, an amazing era. I came into it rather strangely. But that movie era is really what gave us Star Trek. And I wouldn't have it any other way. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we end every episode. Kapla, live long and prosper. Sorry, Kapla, live long and prosper. And peace and long life.